On this episode of GWeek, DC celebrated the start of Chinese New Year earlier this month. We take you to the parade and show you the festivities.
And next, I sit down with Professor Jeffrey Blunt, an award-winning journalist and media professor here at GW, to discuss the recent incidents of blackface around the country and how they're portrayed in the media.
And finally, we talk to GW students about love. More specifically, what is dating like here at Foggy Bottom?
All this and more here on GWeek. Welcome to the show. February is Black History Month, and we want to celebrate here on GWeek. There are many notable African-American alumni who have graduated from GW and gone on to do great things. On this month's episode, we are pleased to highlight some of the many accomplishments made by the African-American community, each of which has made a great impact on society.
Christian Washington graduated from the Columbian College of Arts and Sciences in 2006 and from GW Law in 2009. He is the Chief of Staff at the District of Columbia Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking. At GW, Washington was involved with the Black Law Students Association and Phi Alpha Delta, a professional law fraternity. He also interned while at GW as a clerk on the DC Superior Court and on the DC City Council.
Three-time Olympic medalist Alana Myers-Taylor received her BS in 2006, MTA in 2011, and returned to campus in 2018 when she was awarded an honorary doctorate of public service. The athlete is the first American woman to win 3 bobsled medals. As a Colonial, she was GW softball's first ever recruit in 2003 and the first inductee into GW's Athletics Hall of Fame. She returned last week to host a softball clinic for about 100 local girls to celebrate National Girls and Women in Sports Day.
Lloyd Newton graduated from GW in 1985 with a Master of Arts degree in Public Administration. In 1974, he became the first African American to be selected for the U.S. Air Force Aerial Demonstration Squadron. He would later go on to be the Director of Operations for the United States Special Operations Command.
And who could forget one of GW's most beloved alumni, Kerry Washington. Washington graduated GW in 1998 with a double major in anthropology and sociology. She made her screen debut in the ABC film Magical Makeover in 1994. Her most famous role is in the recent ABC hit TV show Scandal. In April of 2014, she was included in Time Magazine's Time 100 list, and in 2013, she gave the commencement address here at GW.
And to finish our celebration of Black History Month, here's a montage of GW students telling us why they think Black History Month is important.
Black history is extremely important to me because without knowing your roots, not knowing where you come from, you start to lose purpose. And Black history is so important to American history.
It helps us to be able to empower who we are as Black people in America.
Our achievements aren't really acknowledged as much, so in this month it's good to bring focus to that.
I think Black History Month is something that we can all celebrate. I think this country, a lot of our history has been shaped by, accomplishments that have been made by Black people.
Black History Month is important to me because I think it's necessary and important that we preserve and celebrate Black history and culture.
It's important to remember our past, and especially all the important people who have led us here. It's important not to just let that stay in the past, and we should give them the respect that they deserve during this month.
Black History Month is important to me because our representation in history has been skewed on so many levels, and I think that it's important to put out the right messages and to display our history in the correct manner and appropriate manner.
I think it's very important to remember our history, remember all the things that happened to get us to this place and the things that still need to happen.
The younger generation of the history of the colored people, the Black folk, and just give them an overall knowledge about where they come from or where they started.
Now people know about a lot of Black history, so they know civil rights movement, like Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. But if you ask them about Stokely Carmichael or anyone else, they'll kind of draw a blank. And so I think it's important to educate not just about the people that you automatically know, the greats, but also those who are lesser known but still contributed a lot to Black history as a whole.
Welcome.
Do you want me to go or?
I thought I was going.
No,
You go. You go.
Sean and Michael,
Yeah,
why don't
well,
you guys?
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Let's
Okay.
give it a shot. Yeah, okay, ready?
Welcome to GW.
I thought I was supposed to start.
I thought I was going to go first.
I thought.
There we go.
Here comes Parker.
Come on, guys. It's not that hard, all right? It's just one line. All right. You guys know the line.
Welcome to GWTV.
You can visit us at gw-tv.com.
See, that wasn't so bad.
Welcome back to the show. Johns Hopkins University revealed its plans to buy the museum as its newest academic building. This $372.5 million deal will give Johns Hopkins University a prime place in the heart of Washington, D.C. for some of its graduate programs. The museum will stay open for the remainder of the year. The museum itself will be relocating to a smaller building, but potential locations remain undisclosed to the public.
With a greater focus on climate change and sustainability, GW students took initiative and organized a clothing swap to raise awareness about the problematic practices of the fashion industry. Reporter Caroline Bowers has the story.
The GW Innovation Center, Campaign GW, and Green GW teamed up to host a clothing swap on February 3rd. This event is part of a larger initiative to promote sustainability in the modern world of fast fashion. Sarah Shaven and Jessica Layton, two of the organizers, spoke with us about the goals of the event.
Basically, Sarah and I, and also Lucy, kind of came together to work on this event because we were hearing such like a student interest in fast fashion and clothing swaps on campus, and thrifting can be really difficult in this area, so it just seemed like a pretty simple event to come on, to arrange. I don't think we expected it to grab so much traction, but we're really excited about it.
I think it's really important because I personally don't really buy a lot of clothes from first-hand shops. So having opportunities to swap with other like-minded people is really nice because you know that you're helping the environment in some way and not contributing to fast fashion.
Fast fashion is the mass production of inexpensive clothing to keep up with the ever-changing trends. Examples of companies that have been accused of fast fashion include H&M, Zara, and Forever 21. In addition, consumers are buying more clothing than ever and contributing to the practices of fast fashion. Fast fashion also has a negative impact on the environment. This clothing swap is just one of the ways GW students are working together to combat fast fashion practices.
So this is actually the first real collaborative event we've worked on, but there are a lot more coming up. Next week there will be a field trip to the Textile Museum on campus to learn about sustainable fibers, and then we're also using all the leftover unwearable scraps from the event and learning how to make them into handkerchiefs. So that'll be in this space using Innovation Center sewing machines, and then we're also working there's an art club on campus, Art for Advocacy, that meets here, and we'll be working on an upcycling workshop series where students can come in and learn how to better improve their clothes to extend the lifetime of them.
For GWeek, I'm Caroline Bowers.
The popular Art and Technology Museum, Art Tech House, is opening a new exhibit this month that features work from the Italian artist studio Fuse. The exhibit, entitled Everything in Existence, uses 4 separate types of multimedia to draw on audiences about concepts concerning eternity and infinity, going beyond everyday reality.
Chinese New Year began on February 5th of this year. This year is the Year of the Pig. Chinese New Year is marked by the second new moon after the winter solstice. The day is typically celebrated with family, friends, special meals, and festivities.
DC celebrates Chinese New Year in their own fun way. Restaurants have events and special menus, troops come into town, but the center of the DC celebration is the Chinese New Year Parade. GWeek reporter Brooke Witherford attended the parade. Let's take a look.
13th Annual Chinese Lunar New Year Festival in Chinatown, celebrating Chinese heritage across Washington, D.C.
This event is about Chinese New Year in China. So each year, they have different zodiacs about animals. So this year's animal is about pigs.
Although it is the year of the pig, dragons will always play a significant role in the celebration of Chinese New Year. Dragons are a spiritual and cultural symbol that represent great power, dignity, fertility, and wisdom. We heard firsthand from one of the dragon dancers.
Is it hard to hold the dragon up?
It is, yeah. It's about 5 pounds heavy at the head, and everything else is about 2 pounds. But doing all the running is really, really tough.
You know what your zodiac sign is?
I'm a horse.
Oh, not your year.
Not my year.
This event was hosted by the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association, a DC nonprofit organization with the mission to help Chinese immigrants. People both young and old gathered on 8th Street, the heart of Chinatown, to witness live music, firecrackers, and kung fu demonstrations.
This event is pretty crowded, and everybody's so excited. Yeah, Happy New Year!
This is Brooke Witherford reporting for GWeek.
That looks like a great way to celebrate. Thanks, Brooke. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Oh my gosh, Izzy. Michael, what's wrong? Trump just tweeted again. Oh my God. I guess we're gonna have to debate about it. This is Colonial Crossfire.
Joining us now is Professor Jeffrey Blunt. Professor Blunt has over 40 years in the media industry, 12 of which were spent as director of Meet the Press. He is now a media professor here at the George Washington University. Professor Blunt, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, in light of all of the recent photograph that came out about Governor Ralph Northam, he has admitted, then denied, then admitted to wearing blackface in a portrayal of Michael Jackson. This brought about this national conversation regarding blackface and the portrayal of it during a time when it was and still is widely condemned. Being someone who works in media and grew up in Virginia, are you surprised about someone like Governor Ralph Northam's past? Or is it something that you saw a lot of in the 70s or the 80s?
I wasn't surprised at all. I mean, this is, for a man of his age and his generation, I think it's prevalent. I think we are at a position now where we're more aware of, or we should be more aware of what is wrong in terms of, racial indiscretions or outright racism. And I think there really isn't much, he doesn't really have much excuse with regard to saying, it happened in the 80s and it was more acceptable there. It was never really acceptable.
So we talked about this briefly before, but we talked about understanding. And so in many instances, or in some instances back in the 70s and 80s, people weren't always exposed to a culture or climate where blackface or other instances of racism weren't considered bad. In cases like those, is there a need for a general understanding, not tolerance, but understanding?
Yeah, I think there is a need for general understanding, and I think that occurs when something like this happens. Now, we've had this national, or still in the middle of this national conversation, because he's still in office and people are still deciding whether or not they want him there. But in the process, we all learn. In the process, the greater population is now understanding that this is not a proper thing to do. And hopefully we move forward with this understanding and we'll see less and less of it.
So recently, the Hatchet uncovered photos from GW's own past, where people were found in blackface and also in KKK costumes, in a city that has a large African American population. But not only that, has a history of equality marches, most important of which maybe even be the Civil Rights March on Washington, where Martin Luther King Jr. gave the famous "I Have a Dream" speech, and that was less than 20 years after we have these portrayals of blackface. Why do you think that they did it anyways? Because they obviously knew, you know what I mean? They obviously had this awareness that blackface wasn't okay. Can it simply be just chalked to ignorance?
No, I think I suppose, if I had to be completely honest, it could be, but I think it also is the fact that oftentimes where you find defiance from people of color, like the March on Washington and items like that, you often find on the other side people who recognize that racism is wrong, but feel threatened by the marches and by the growth and development of cultures or people who are less than them. And so you actually see people acting out more in those situations because they want to try and keep people in their place.
Do you think that's something that we see today?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
How so?
Well, I think the whole, what we have seen since Trump became president, the MAGA hat, his constantly responding to people of color as racist or ignorant, so forth and so on, just adds to that. And I think it is a little bit of fear, a little bit of white fragility that things are changing. The demographics are changing in the country. And I think having a black president for 8 years was shocking enough to a lot of people that they wanted to ignore some of the things that Trump stood for to vote him in the office. And I think that part of that is where we stand with Northam as well.
Where do you think that privilege falls into this entire equation?
I think people don't understand, particularly a lot of white Americans don't understand their privilege. Okay. I do believe that that's the case. And I think that Northam is helping with that as well, because you understand that these guys in the yearbooks you found, I heard a discussion at UVA, they did the same thing and they talked about it. Well, people who did that, even understanding that it was wrong to do, did it because they realized there was probably going to be no consequence. And that's the privilege. Every time a politician like Northam does something like this, others have to admit, oh, wait a minute, I've done the same thing. We learned that he got to be governor, and that's privilege. Even though he did those things, Trump got to be president, even though he was saying those things. That's privilege. And I think it's becoming more and more part of the national conversation, which I think is good for everybody.
Yeah. So just going back quickly to just how this comes into GW, as an African American professor here, and as someone who calls GW their home to some respect, how did it make you feel? Were you surprised at all that this was in GW's past?
I wasn't surprised at all. I think that is the history of this country. It saddens me. When I see that, one, it makes me angry. Two, as an African American, it makes me question, makes me fight for, to protect my feeling of being human, because I think they're trying to take away my humanity and make me feel less than that when I see that. So I have to fight to remain human in my own eyes. And I think that's the hard part, the anger and then the fight to resist somebody trying to make you feel less than who you are. I'm not surprised at all about the history of racism. And one of the things of living as an African American in this country, you realize that oftentimes the things that you love are destroyed by racism. And I grew up loving Rikki Tikki Tavi as a story, and then found out that the author was a racist. I grew up, loving The Wizard of Oz, and then found out that the author was a racist. And not only was a racist, but also believed in genocide with regard to the Native Americans. So you get used to being disappointed, and you just move on.
So switching gears now to blackface in media. Media and entertainment definitely has some skeletons in their closet. Late night hosts like Jimmy Fallon and Jimmy Kimmel both have histories of having done blackface on their shows, Jimmy Fallon specifically with SNL. And this was into the 2000s when they also had African American cast members like Tracy Morgan, who was on the show at the time. How do you think that was allowed to happen on a show purposefully in the 2000s? And do you think that they're going to have repercussions for it?
I think it probably won't have repercussions. I think it was allowed to happen because they thought it was funny. I think you can't ask Tracy Morgan as an African American to and probably not in charge to police the people who are in charge of running the shows. But I think that it happened, and then I think you have to look at the body of their work since then, and you see that both of them in times of of stress when it comes to African Americans in this country, police violence and so forth and so on, have been very vocal in favor of Black Lives Matter and things like that. So I think that even in Northam's case, that there is potential for growth, and you, as an African American, you have to recognize that, or else what's the point? I mean, why do we march? We march so that we educate people and change things. So if people show they change, then I think you have to try and meet them halfway. And one of the things that I thought about with Northam is when I first heard this, I said, well, he's got to go. And someone said, well, what if he changed? And I said, well, it's not a matter of whether or not he changed. Can he provide leadership to now 20% of the state population who doesn't trust him? That's more important now. I mean, can he actually legislate? Can he do his job? And then I was talking to some people from my hometown, and they said, well, you should talk to more Black folk in Virginia and listen to what he's done in terms of bringing Medicaid back for a lot of poor African Americans and doing other things that uplift African American community in terms of legislation. And they said, we want to give him another chance because of that. So then my response is, well, I didn't vote for Northam. I don't really know that much about him, honestly. I know what I see in the media right now. But people of color are telling me that they want to give him another chance. And so I have to say to myself, those are the people who live with him. Those are his constituents. If they have decided he's moved on, then I think it's time for me to, take their advice. And I would say, if he's grown, if they feel he's grown, and if he is, if he can show them that he continually grows, and he does it publicly in the things that he does, the events that he has, and he's continually open about his growth, and those people believe in him, then he should have another chance.
Okay. So surely this isn't the end that we will unfortunately hear of blackface.
Right.
But as more people of position or more people of influence start to, their stories may come out that they have done blackface in the past or something like that, what do you think the solution is as more of these photos start to come out? And is there a hardline punishment we should do, like resignation, or like you said earlier, should we see if that growth is there, and how do we maybe avoid it for the future?
Well, I think that's going back to looking at the whole person. And I do think all of us would like to think that if we make a mistake, we can have a chance to redeem ourselves. But I think that looks at the situation. So if we know, if there's some way we know that this person actively did something and what they said was beyond the pale, what they said was truly disgusting about Native Americans or African Americans or some other people of color, then that's a different thing, particularly if you're trying to be a legislator. You can't be in Congress if you hold the views that all Muslims are terrible people, because you can't represent a part of the population. And none of us should want a racist in any kind of office that represents the United States or represents people in the United States. So I think we're in a position where we have to, we've got an awakening, as I was saying earlier. We've got this awakening now that we know that this is happening. We're having this discussion. And then I think we have to decide, those of us of color, where we move forward. And if it depends on the level, I think, of the infraction as to how we treat it. There's overt racism that's over the top. And then there are people who I really think, and I teach a course in implicit bias, who don't think what they're doing is wrong, or don't understand what they're doing is wrong. And those people we can work with and educate.
And help empower people at the same time.
I mean, if in 2015 we found you were walking around with a Klan suit on, that's not an excuse. That's unacceptable, and especially if you're in a political office.
Well, this was great. Thank you so much for being here, Professor Blunt. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. We'll be right back. Stay with us. And this is GWTV.
Nailed that. Good job, guys.
Welcome back to the show. GW physicists recently discovered that simpler parts make for a more efficient system. A team led by Neil Johnson, a professor at GW's physics department, developed a new decentralized artificial intelligence system that accurately mimics the movement of a fly larvae and provides a framework for developing complex systems made up by substandard decentralized parts.
Tonic is a staple here on GW's campus and a must-stop for parents, students, and alumni. Reporter Dana Wagner took a closer look at Tonic's history on campus, as well as its current place as a homey place for hot meals.
I'm Dana Wagner, and we're here at Tonic learning about the history and its importance to the GW community.
GW alumni Richard Quigley opened Tonic as a pharmacy in 1891. Soon after, he started serving food at the lunch bar there. Quigley's face was familiar to students as they came in for their prescriptions and lunches. He also was a friend to students, offering them money to loan or just someone to talk to. Today, Tonic still stands in the same building and still provides students with a comfortable place to sit back and enjoy a meal, similarly to how they did it over 100 years ago. We sat down to interview Diamond, a Tonic employee, to tell us more about the GW community in the Tonic environment.
My experience, it ranges from if they're freshmen to seniors. Like, you can tell they'd be really excited to eat here, especially in the summertime when they come for the meet and greet families when they moving in. It's really busy. They play a big part because you guys, like I said, they're the heart of GW, and they bring a lot of business. They bring a lot of good energy, a lot of good vibes. It's a home here. Like, it's so small that we make sure that everybody's good. Like, so we try to make that and put that towards our customer to have you guys always feel welcome. Like 110% of the time, we want you guys to feel comfortable. We want you guys to come here more often. We want you guys to be comfortable when you get here. So a family setting is what we strive to be because it's so small and people need that home away from home, you know?
Reporting for GWeek, this is Dana Wagner.
Thanks, Dana. Before hosting the 2019 White House Correspondents' Dinner, Ron Chernow, author of the Alexander Hamilton biography that inspired the hit musical, is coming to GW. Chernow will speak at the Lisner Auditorium on February 20th.
Valentine's Day. Every year, people around the world celebrate this Hallmark holiday with their loved ones, including right here on campus. Reporter Jessica Nix surveyed GW students to get a better understanding of dating life at GW.
It's February, the month of love. I'm here in Kogan Plaza trying to figure out if love is still alive at GW.
Last year, Tinder released a survey which found that 72% of respondents had chosen to be single. We conducted our own survey of more than 150 GW students and found that although 69% of respondents were single, only 40% said it was by choice.
So what do you think of the dating life here at GW?
Not that bad. I'm pretty single though.
I think the queer dating scene at GW is really interesting because everyone knows each other. And so like there's this joke that like my ex-girlfriend's ex-girlfriend is my girlfriend. You know what I'm saying? And so like it's all like you end up just dating in like this very small pool of people, you know?
I feel like a lot of like the dating pool is through like Tinder, stuff online, or like meeting through classes, stuff like that. But I feel like most people are single.
So are you single?
Yes, and ready to mingle, ladies.
To each their own. I mean, so far it hasn't really worked out for me yet again, but
something that works for some.
You never know. People transfer, so it's fine.
Are you single?
I am very single, yes.
Are you single by choice or is there a reason?
Single by choice, you know, playing the field.
A lot of the people I know who are single by choice, just you know, they want to enjoy college and not have that extra. It's definitely a time commitment, so that's a big thing.
But like, I'm pretty sure like everyone's got their head down in their studies. I'm usually playing Fortnite, which is my issue. Yeah, overall I'd say I see a lot of single people, but some really nice couples too, of course.
I'm Jessica Nix reporting for GWeek.
Crazy love.
So why do you think more people are deciding to be single while they're in college?
I think it has to do with a lot of things. I think that's like a very loaded question, but I think one of the biggest reasons is the fact that, you know, this is a city school. I think that a lot of people go to state schools thinking that they may find their spouse or significant other, and may even have the intention of that going into a state school, but I think that the culture is a little different at a city school. Some people do have that, but I don't think a lot of people do.
Absolutely. We live in such a hotbed of activity here that I see so many people go and intern at the House, for Congress, for different legislators. So many different things are happening, and I'm really not surprised that people don't have time for relationships living in a city like this, especially at GW.
Yeah, especially considering everyone seems to have a job or an internship or something around that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, that's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. For more GWeek, you can catch us online at gw-tv.com. You can also check us out at any of the social media you see below.
GWeek is always looking for more journalists to join our show, and we are an equal opportunity organization. If interested, please email at television.gw@gmail.com. That's all for this episode, and as always, we'll see you around campus.